I used to believe that love could make anyone beautiful, that if someone looked at you long enough, with enough tenderness, you'd start to see yourself the way they did, glowing, wanted, enough. That's what I felt the first time Ethan looked at me. It was at a friend's small backyard party. Cheap fairy lights, warm air, plastic cups, laughter, too loud to be real. I stood near the fence, pretending to text, hoping no one noticed I was alone. I wasn't the kind of girl who turned heads. My hair was dull brown, my skin pale and freckled, and my body, well, let's just say I never got called cute or pretty by anyone who wasn't trying to be nice. But then, Ethan walked in. Tall, easy smile, that confident kind of energy that made people turn toward him without realizing it. He was the type who didn't need to try. And when his eyes found mine, he smiled. Not the polite kind, the kind that made my heart stutter, like it had forgotten how to beat. He walked right up to me. "Are you hiding?" he asked, "or just waiting for someone to notice you?" It was meant to be funny, but it hit a little too close. I laughed anyway, because that's what insecure girls do. We laugh to keep from cracking open. "I'm just avoiding awkward small talk," I said. "Then you'll love me," he grinned. I'm terrible at small talk, and just like that, the night changed. We talked for hours about books, music, and everything in between. He told me he liked that I was real, not like the fake girls who tried too hard. It sounded like a compliment. Back then, I thought it was. That night when I went home, I replayed everything: his smile, the way his voice softened when he said my name, the way he brushed a leaf from my hair like it mattered. For the first time in years, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't instantly flinch. I even smiled a little. Ethan and I started seeing each other more after that. Coffee dates turned into weekend trips. Texts turned into late-night calls that lasted until sunrise. He said I made him feel calm, grounded, different, and I stupidly, desperately fell in love. I didn't see the red flags then, the small remarks disguised as jokes, like when he'd say, "You'd look even better if you lost a little weight," or "You're cute in your own way," not like the girls guys usually go for, but that's what makes you special. Each comment was a needle, and I let them pierce me quietly. I told myself he meant well. I told myself love was supposed to hurt a little. When he asked me to meet his friends, I was nervous but excited. I spent hours getting ready, trying to look effortless. His friends were all gorgeous, like they'd stepped straight out of an Instagram ad. When Ethan introduced me, I saw the quick, polite smiles. I heard one whisper, "She's different," and another stifle a laugh. Ethan didn't defend me. He just laughed with them. That night, when I asked him about it, he said, "Don't be so sensitive. You know how they are. You don't need to impress anyone." But deep down, I knew he was embarrassed. Weeks turned into months, and the warmth that used to light his eyes when he looked at me began to fade. His texts slowed, his voice turned sharp. I tried harder. New clothes, makeup tutorials, anything to keep him, but nothing worked. One night, I caught him scrolling through another girl's Instagram, a model type with long legs and a perfect smile. When I asked, he said, "You wouldn't understand. You're just not like that. Not like that." Those 3 words cracked something inside me. 2 days later, he called me to talk. I already knew what it meant. He said he needed someone who matched his lifestyle. That I was sweet, but not the kind of girl he saw himself with long term. He said I was beautiful on the inside, and that one day, someone would appreciate that. I remember smiling through the tears, pretending to be strong. But the moment the door closed behind him, I fell apart. I stayed in bed for days, the silence louder than any heartbreak I'd ever known. I stopped eating. I stopped caring. And then one morning, I looked in the mirror, eyes swollen, face pale, heart completely shattered, and I whispered, "Never again." That was the day something in me changed. I didn't know it yet, but his rejection was about to become the reason for my rebirth. The morning after he left, I sat on the floor of my apartment surrounded by fragments of what used to be us. The sweater, he said, looked cute on me. The coffee mug with our initials written in faded Sharpie. The Polaroid he took of me laughing, before I learned that laughter could hide heartbreak. Everywhere I looked, there was a ghost of him. At first, I kept expecting a message, something like "I miss you," or "I made a mistake." But days passed, then weeks. Nothing. I saw his Instagram instead. All smiles, all parties, and eventually, a new girl. The kind of girl I used to compare myself to in bathroom mirrors, flawless, effortless, glowing. I stared at her photos until my chest burned. She was everything he said I wasn't. And yet, she had what I wanted, his attention. That night, I deleted every photo, every message, every trace of him, but pain has a way of staying, even when the person is gone. The months that followed were quiet, too quiet. I stopped answering calls. I stopped meeting friends. I even quit my job, partly because I couldn't face people, partly because I just didn't have the energy to keep pretending. I told everyone I was fine, but wasn single quotes t. inside. I was crumbling. Every time I passed a mirror, I saw the girl he didn't want. Too plain, too soft, too not enough. Until one morning, I caught my reflection again. Messy hair, hollow eyes, oversized hoodie, and I felt something new. Disgust. Not at him, at me, at the way I let his words define my worth. That was the day I decided to disappear. Not from the world, but from the version of myself he had left behind. I packed my things, sold what I could, and moved 3 states away to a small coastal town in Oregon. No one knew me there. No one looked at me with pity. No one called me sweet in that condescending way people do when they think you're fragile. I got a tiny apartment above a bookstore and a job at a local cafe. The rent was low, the work was simple, and the ocean was 2 blocks away. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I walked every morning before sunrise, when the streets were empty and the world felt brand new. The salt in the air burned my lungs, but it also cleansed something inside me. Slowly, I began to exist again. One day, a customer at the cafe, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes, handed me her card. She was a professional photographer. "You've got an interesting look," she said. I almost laughed. "That's polite for saying I look tired." She smiled. "No, not tired. Real people don't realize that's rare." She asked if I'd model for a local brand she shot for. Nothing glamorous, just natural light portraits. I wanted to say no, but something in me whispered, why not? That small decision changed everything. She taught me how to hold my posture, how to find light, how to see myself differently. The camera didn't lie, but it didn't judge either. When I saw the photos, I didn't recognize myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked strong. There was something raw, something beautiful in my eyes that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't the kind of beauty he wanted, it was mine. Over time, I started taking care of myself, not to impress anyone, but to heal. I began working out, eating right, journaling, learning makeup for me. Every step was slow, every day a quiet fight against the voice that still whispered, "You'll never be enough." But one day, I looked in the mirror and smiled. For real this time. I wasn't the same girl anymore. The shy, uncertain girl who begged to be loved was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, colder, beautiful, in a way that didn't need validation. By the end of that year, the photographer, her name was Linda, encouraged me to post my photos online. I hesitated, but finally did. I made a new account, using my middle name, Arya. The pictures gained attention quickly. A small local brand reached out, then another. Within months, modeling gigs started to fill my weekends. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was once too plain for the man who said he loved me, and now strangers online called me stunning. But I didn't do it for them. I did it because each photo was proof that I survived. One afternoon, while scrolling through messages, I froze. There it was. A familiar name. Ethan. The message was short. "Hey, long time. I saw your photos. You look wow. I can't believe it's you." For a full minute, I just stared at the screen. The same man who once made me feel invisible was now reaching out like I was some fantasy he'd discovered. My heart didn't race this time. It stayed calm, steady, cold. I didn't reply, not yet, because this wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning of his lesson. It was a Tuesday night. When I opened his message again, I'd seen it before, a dozen times, but this time I didn't scroll past it. His name, Ethan, blinked on the screen like a ghost that had been waiting to be acknowledged. "Hey, long time. I saw your photos. You look wow. I can't believe it's you." I could almost hear his voice, the same tone he used to charm, manipulate, and apologize. Only this time, I wasn't the same girl who used to melt when he said my name. No. This time, I felt power. I waited 3 days before replying. It wasn't intentional at first. I just wanted to be sure I could face him without shaking. But as the days passed, I realized the delay had power too. When I finally typed back, it was short. "Hey Ethan, yeah, it's been a while." Nothing more. No warmth, no anger, just a polite chill, the kind that leaves people wondering where they stand. He replied within minutes. Can't believe how much you've changed. You look incredible. You, modeling now. I smiled faintly. The irony was poetic. This was the same man who once told me I should try to look more feminine when we went out, the one who laughed when I said I wanted to lose weight for myself. Now he was fascinated, curious, and I knew exactly what to do with that curiosity. I didn't block him. I didn't ignore him either. Instead, I let him talk. He told me about his life, how he'd broken up with that girl, how work was stressful, how he'd grown up a lot. He used the same tired phrases men use when they want you to forget the past without taking responsibility for it. I replied carefully, always leaving space for him to fill. A simple, "Oh really?" Here. That must have been hard there enough to keep him chasing. And he did chase. Every message came faster than the last. It didn't take long before he was the one asking for my attention, my time, my energy. The tables had turned and he didn't even realize it. One night, around midnight, he messaged again. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I don't know what I was thinking before. I was stupid. I almost laughed. But I typed. We were both young. Ethan, it's in the past. A lie. I remembered every word he said the night he left me. How he'd looked me in the eye and said, "You're not what I imagined myself with," as if I were a mistake he needed to erase. Now he wanted me back because I looked like what he'd imagined. But revenge isn't about screaming "I told you so." It's about making them feel it slowly, deeply, quietly. Started talking more. A few messages a day turned into long nightly chats. He asked for my number again, and after some hesitation, fake hesitation, I gave it. The first call felt strange. His voice was the same, smooth but uncertain. He laughed nervously, tried to flirt. I gave him soft responses, just enough warmth to make him believe there was still something between us. He began telling me about his regrets, his loneliness, his wish to start over. I listened like a therapist, not a lover. Inside, I was calm, detached. He didn't know that every word he said was another note in the symphony of his own downfall. 2 weeks later, he asked if we could meet, just for coffee. He said. I told him I'd think about it. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, same face, same body, but not the same girl. I didn't want to look pretty for him. I wanted to look expensive. The kind of beauty you admire but can't touch. When we finally met, it was at a small cafe downtown. He arrived first. Of course, nervous, trying to look casual. When I walked in, his jaw literally dropped. Aria, he said, almost breathless. You look unbelievable. I smiled faintly. Hi Ethan, it's been a while. He reached for a hug. I stepped back slightly, just enough for him to feel rejected without saying it. We sat down. He tried to reminisce, to joke, to flirt, but every time he leaned in, I leaned back. Every time he asked a personal question, I deflected. By the end of the coffee, he was visibly frustrated, because for the first time, I wasn't chasing him. Over the next month, he tried harder, texting every morning, complimenting everything, my voice, my smile, even my handwriting. I responded in doses, enough to keep him hooked, never enough to satisfy. And just when I felt he'd fallen deep enough, I started posting more pictures, behind-the-scenes clips, little glimpses of the new life he wasn't part of. Every like from him was a confession, every comment, a reminder that I now controlled the narrative. He wanted me back, he needed me back, but he couldn't have me, not anymore. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. One night, he texted, I think I still love you. I stared at the words for a long time, and then I replied, I think you loved the version of me you destroyed. She doesn't exist anymore. He read it instantly. No reply. A minute later, can we talk? But I didn't answer. Not that night. Not ever again. The next morning, I deleted his number. I didn't block him. Blocking is mercy. I just let him message into silence, like shouting into a void. He would never understand that his biggest punishment wasn't losing me. It was realizing that the girl he once called ugly had become the woman who didn't need him to feel beautiful. And that realization would haunt him longer than any heartbreak ever could. It's strange how silence can become addictive. After I stopped replying to Ethan, the first few days were uneasy. My phone would buzz and I'd feel that familiar rush, part fear, part habit. Then I'd see his name and ignore it, again and again. Each time I didn't respond, it felt easier, cleaner, like peeling away the last traces of someone who'd poisoned me slowly. But revenge is tricky. It feels righteous at first, like balance, like justice until you start to wonder if it's just another form of obsession. And that question began haunting me. I was sitting at my vanity one night, brushing my hair before bed. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. I looked at my reflection, long hair, clear skin, bright eyes. I should have felt proud. After all, this was the woman I'd built from scratch. But something about that reflection unsettled me. She looked calm, confident, beautiful, and yet I didn't recognize her. Who was she now? The woman who used to cry in parking lots because a man didn't text back, or the one who made that same man beg for a response? Was I healed, or just hardened? The next day, my best friend Lily dropped by. She'd known me before the transformation, before the gym, the diet, the confidence classes, the therapy. She'd seen me at my worst. When I opened the door, she smiled wide. "You look incredible, Arya. Seriously, you've changed so much." "Thanks," I said, pouring coffee for us both. She took a sip and looked at me carefully. "Ethan texted you again, didn't he?" I shrugged. "Every day for a week. I'm ignoring him." "That's good, right?" I nodded, but something about her tone made me look up. "What?" She hesitated. "I just hope you're doing this for you, not for him." I froze. "I mean," she continued, "I know he hurt you. God, I wanted to punch that guy myself. But sometimes, when we focus too much on proving people wrong, we forget to move on." Her words hit deeper than I wanted them to, because somewhere deep inside, I knew my success, my confidence, my glue up, it had started because of him, to prove him wrong, to make him regret, and I hated that he still had that power, even if he didn't know it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, staring at the glow of my phone. One unread message from Ethan. "I don't understand what happened. I thought we were reconnecting." I almost laughed. Reconnecting, as if we'd ever truly connected in the first place. But then another thought hit me, one I didn't expect. Was I becoming him? Because that's what he'd done to me, played with emotions, dangled affection, withheld kindness to make me chase it. And now, I was doing the same. The realization made me sick. The next morning, I decided to face myself. Literally. I stood in front of the mirror. No makeup, messy hair, tired eyes. The woman staring back wasn't perfect, but she was real, and maybe that's what I'd lost along the way. The real me. Revenge had started as healing, a way to take control, but now, it was becoming a mask. So, I did something impulsive. I called Ethan. He answered on the first ring, his voice shaking slightly. "Arya." "Yeah," I said quietly. "We need to talk." There was a long pause. "Please," he said. "I've been losing my mind. Can we meet tomorrow?" I said. "Same cafe, 6 p.m. When I hung up, I felt calm. Not excited, not scared, just ready. The next day, I didn't dress to impress. No designer clothes, no perfect hair, just jeans, a white shirt, and the version of myself I'd been hiding, the one who wasn't trying to prove anything. When I walked into the cafe, he was already there. Same nervous smile, same charm, but now, I saw through it, every gesture rehearsed, every compliment calculated. "Arya," he said, standing up, "you look amazing, as always." I sat down, folding my hands. "You don't need to say that." He blinked, thrown off. I wanted you to know I've changed." "Have you?" I asked. "Or do you just miss the way I used to make you feel?" He frowned. "That's not fair." I leaned forward. "You left me because you said I wasn't good enough, because you wanted someone prettier. Now that I fit your definition, suddenly you want me back. That's not love, Ethan. That's nostalgia for control." He swallowed hard, guilt flickering in his eyes. I was stupid. I didn't know what I had. I nodded slowly. "You're right, you didn't." He reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back. "Ethan, I didn't call you to reopen anything. I just needed to see you, to be sure." "Sure of what?" he asked, his voice breaking. "That I'm really over you." The silence that followed was deafening. He sat there, speechless, as I stood up and pushed my chair back. I left without looking back. That night, I stood in front of my mirror again. No makeup, no performance, just me. For the first time in years, I didn't see an ugly girl or a beautiful woman. I saw someone whole, someone who didn't need revenge to feel powerful. And yet, something about his face at that cafe, the shock, the regret, it stayed with me. Not because I missed him, but because I realized how satisfying it was to finally let go on my terms. A week passed, then another, no calls, no texts, silence, real silence this time. Until one night, an unknown number called. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Arya. It was his voice, trembling, different. What do you want, Ethan? I need to see you. Please. It's important. My stomach tightened. Why? There was a pause. Then he whispered, it's about her. The girl I left you for. Something happened. The line went quiet. And just like that, the past wasn't done with me yet. They say revenge tastes sweet, but mine started with a bitter reflection. Every morning, I stood in front of the mirror. Not to admire, but to remember. The girl staring back wasn't the one he left. She wasn't the one he called embarrassing to be seen with. She wasn't the girl who used to cry in bathroom stalls because a man thought beauty was the only currency of love. No, she was someone forged from pain, shaped by humiliation, and refined through silence. It had been almost 2 years since Ethan left me. 2 years since he told me, you're a good person, but I can't pretend I'm attracted to you. 2 years since he packed his things, kissed my forehead like I was a child, and left me standing in the ruins of my own confidence. That night, I promised myself something. I wouldn't just move on, I would rise. At first, it was survival. Then it became transformation. And now it was vindication. I worked hard, harder than I thought I could. Gym at 5 a.m., classes at night, eating clean, sleeping little, chasing goals like they owed me an apology. The scars under my makeup weren't from acne anymore. They were from the battles I fought inside myself. By the time my company promoted me to lead designer, I had already designed a new version of me. Confidence, quiet and sharp, style, elegant but subtle. The world that once looked through me now looked at me. And that's when Ethan came back into view. It happened by accident or fate. My team was presenting a campaign for a luxury brand, and he walked into the room as one of the client's marketing heads. The air changed. I swear, I could hear my heartbeat in the silence that followed. He looked smaller, not physically, but spiritually. The man who once treated me like I was invisible suddenly looked unsure. His eyes widened when he recognized me, and I saw his mouth part slightly, like he wanted to say my name but couldn't. Good afternoon, I said calmly, pretending I didn't even know him. Shall we begin? The presentation went flawlessly. Every slide, every word, every confident nod was part of my silent revenge. When it ended, he approached me as the rest of the team packed up. Lena, he said softly. I looked at him with polite confusion. Yes, it's me, Ethan. I blinked once, tilting my head slightly. Oh, right. From years ago. He smiled nervously. Yeah, wow, you look amazing. There it was, the same mouth that once called me ugly now trembling to find the right compliment. Thank you, I said flatly, glancing at my watch. I'm afraid I have another meeting. And I walked away. But revenge isn't always about walking away. It's about knowing when to turn back. A week later, he sent a message on LinkedIn. Would love to catch up, maybe coffee. It's been too long. I stared at the screen for a long time. Every insecure version of me whispered, show him what he lost. But another voice, the stronger one, said, show him what you became. So I said yes. We met at a cafe downtown. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his cup, while I sat still, composed. My nails were painted a deep red, the color of control. I have to say, he began, you've changed so much. You're glowing. I've worked hard, I said. Turns out, when you stop trying to please the wrong people, life becomes lighter. He laughed awkwardly. I guess I was one of those wrong people. Guess. I raised a brow. He sighed. I was stupid. I thought looks mattered more than connection. I didn't see what I had until I lost it. I leaned forward slightly. You didn't lose me, Ethan. You just never deserved me. The silence that followed was everything I had waited for. He stared at me, at my eyes, my smile, my unshakable calm, and realized his power was gone. The girl who once begged for validation was now untouchable. He asked if we could start over. I smiled. I'm afraid I'm already seeing someone. It wasn't true, but it didn't have to be, because my revenge wasn't about finding someone better. It was about becoming someone he could never have again. That night, I stood before the mirror once more. This time, I didn't stare to remember. I stared to celebrate. The reflection that once looked broken now looked proud. The eyes that once cried now glowed with quiet triumph. I whispered to the girl I used to be, you were never ugly. You were just surrounded by people too blind to see your worth. And for the first time in years, I smiled at my own reflection, not out of vanity, but victory, because revenge isn't destroying someone else, it's rebuilding yourself so beautifully that they crumble when they see what they threw away. Used to think revenge ended when the villain saw what they lost, but I was wrong. Sometimes, it really begins when they start chasing what they can never get back. After that coffee meeting, Ethan began showing up everywhere at first. It was small things, a comment on a mutual friend's post, a congratulations on my company's LinkedIn update, a polite message or two about how proud he was of me. It became uncomfortable. He started finding reasons to stop by my office under the pretense of business. Once, he dropped off a client report that could have easily been emailed. Another time, he happened to be at the same networking event, lingering near me like a shadow that refused to leave. But I wasn't scared. I was calm, because for the first time, he was the one losing sleep. One afternoon, I came down to the lobby of our building and found him waiting by the elevator, pretending to scroll through his phone. I didn't even flinch. "Ethan," I said, tone neutral, "is this coincidence becoming a habit?" He looked up, startled, then forced a smile. "Oh, hey, Lena. I was just in the area. Thought I'd say hi." I smiled politely. "Hi, goodbye," and walked out the glass doors. I heard him call my name, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The power balance had shifted forever, and he could feel it. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I miss you. I know you probably don't care, but I can't stop thinking about you." I stared at the text for a moment, then blocked the number. He tried from another one the next day. "Can we just talk? Just once, please?" I blocked that too, but it didn't stop him. He found ways to contact me, emails, fake profiles, even flowers delivered to my office with a card that said, "Still beautiful, still mine." The irony made me laugh, because he never wanted me when I was broken, but now that I was whole, he wanted to claim me. That's the thing about men like Ethan. They don't love you, they love your reflection when it flatters them. 2 weeks later, I ran into him again, this time at a corporate dinner. He looked bad, pale, tired, his shirt wrinkled like he hadn't slept properly in days. His confidence, that smug, effortless charm, had evaporated. He tried to sit beside me, but I politely moved to another seat, saying I had to speak with a client. I didn't even look at him. Halfway through dinner, he excused himself, and as he passed behind me, I heard him whisper, "You're cold, Lena. You used to care." I turned slightly, just enough for him to see my calm eyes. "I cared," I said softly. "You didn't." And then, I returned to my conversation, as if he never existed. The following week, he posted something strange on social media, a photo of an old couple with the caption, "You never realize what you had until it's gone." The comments were full of sympathy. I didn't react, because the truth was, I didn't need to say anything. My silence was louder than any revenge post could ever be. But karma, she's a patient artist, and her masterpiece was only beginning. 3 months later, I got a call from a mutual friend, Jess. She worked at the same firm Ethan did. "Hey," she said hesitantly, "I know this might sound weird, but are you okay with me telling you something about Ethan?" I shrugged, though she couldn't see it. "Sure, he's not doing great, like, really not great. He's been drinking a lot, missing deadlines, even snapped at his boss during a meeting. I think the breakup from his girlfriend hit him hard." "Girlfriend?" I repeated, mildly curious. "Yeah," Jess sighed. "He dated some influencer after you, but she dumped him last month. Apparently, she told everyone he was, boring, self-absorbed." I almost laughed, not because of his pain, but because life finally showed him the mirror he used to hold up to me. Jess continued. "He keeps bringing you up though, says you were the only real thing he ever had." I smiled quietly. Maybe he finally understood that beauty isn't a face, it's presence, and mine had become something he couldn't live without, because it was the one thing he could never earn back. But I wasn't done yet. See, I didn't want to ruin him. I wanted to teach him. And sometimes, the best lesson comes wrapped in kindness. So one day, I replied to one of his emails. "Hi Ethan, I hope you're doing better. I've forgiven you. Take care of yourself." Lena, no emotion, no promise, just closure, cold and clean. He replied within an hour, "I don't want forgiveness, I want another chance." I didn't answer, and that was the moment his downfall was complete. Months later, my company partnered with a new firm for a major campaign. Guess whose name appeared in the partnership email? Ethan's. He would be reporting to me. The first meeting was tense. He walked into the conference room, eyes low, voice shaky. Morning, Ms. Lane. Ms. Lane. Not Lena. And that's when I knew I didn't just get my revenge. I rewrote our story. He wasn't my heartbreak anymore. He was just another man in a meeting, nervous, polite, and utterly powerless before the woman he once dismissed. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the city lights shimmer against the window. I wasn't angry anymore. Revenge had run its course. What replaced it was peace, deep, unshakable peace. He was falling, and I wasn't watching to enjoy it. I was watching to remember that once upon a time, I begged a man to see my worth, and now, the same man couldn't even meet my eyes without drowning in regret, and that, I realized, was the most poetic revenge of all. You don't always know the exact moment a person breaks. Sometimes, it's loud, a fight, a confession, a public meltdown. And sometimes, it's quiet, just a voice on the phone that no longer sounds alive. For Ethan, it was both. It started with an email from HR. He'd missed another deadline, another meeting, another client pitch. They were reviewing his performance. I was CC'd because our companies were partners on the project. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. There was a part of me, the part that had once cried over him, that felt something twist inside. Not pity, exactly. Not satisfaction, either. Just memory. I remembered the nights he'd laughed while I cried. The mornings he ignored me like I was invisible. The words that broke me so many times I stopped counting. And now, I was the one who got to decide whether he'd stay on the project. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just typed one word under internal feedback: unreliable. Then, hit send. A week later, Jess called me again. Lena, she said quietly, you might want to sit down for this. Ethan got fired. I froze. What happened? Apparently, he snapped at his supervisor during a meeting, threw a file across the table. Security had to walk him out. It was bad. I didn't respond for a moment. The city traffic hummed outside my window, steady and uncaring. Jess sighed. He's been different, you know? Drinking again. Showing up late. I think he's staying at a motel now. He's not the same person. I whispered. He never was. But after I hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, because sometimes revenge doesn't end with fire, it ends with silence. And that silence echoes louder than screams. A few days later, as I was leaving work, I saw him, standing across the street in the cold, hands in his pockets, eyes red and tired. He wasn't watching me like a stalker, more like a ghost revisiting his grave. For a moment, our eyes met. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. The traffic lights changed. People passed between us, and when I looked again, he was gone. I went home, poured myself tea, and tried to shake the image off, but it clung to me like smoke after a fire. The next morning, I got a message from an unknown number. I know you hate me. I deserve it, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You were right. Beauty fades, but ugly hearts don't. And I finally see mine. It was signed with a single initial, E. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I didn't know what to say. I had wanted him to understand, and now that he did, it hurt more than I expected. 2 weeks passed, the project wrapped up successfully without him, and I went back to my usual life, meetings, deadlines, dinners with friends. Then, one night, I saw his name trending on social media, not in a scandal, not in glory, a missing person report. Ethan Reed, last seen near the Hudson River, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. My phone slipped from my hand. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the post, my heart pounding like it used to when I loved him. Then the comments started rolling in, people speculating, some offering prayers, some cruel enough to say, he probably just ran away again. I couldn't breathe, because despite everything, I didn't want him gone. I just wanted him to feel what I felt, not vanished because of it. 2 days later, police found him alive, passed out in a cheap motel room on the edge of the city, empty bottles on the floor, his wallet missing, and a handwritten note on the nightstand. They didn't release what the note said, but Jess texted me later that night. He wrote about you. My chest tightened. He said he wanted to call you but didn't know how. Said you were the only one who ever really saw him, that he hated himself for what he did to you. I put my phone down and cried for the first time in months. Not for love, not for regret, but because closure sometimes arrives as pain, not peace. I didn't visit him, Not then. Not when he got out of rehab. Not when he started working part-time fixing computers in a friend's shop. But I did check on him quietly, through people, through updates. He was sober, alone, humble, different. And in some strange way. That was the ending I wanted all along, not his ruin, but his realization. One evening, months later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Lena, you probably don't want to read this, and I don't blame you. But I owe you the truth. You were never ugly. You were terrifying, because you saw through me. You loved me for who I could have been, and I hated you for it. I thought leaving you would make me free, but all I did was trade peace for loneliness. Thank you for letting me fall. It's the only reason I learned how to stand. Ethan. I folded the letter and placed it in a box with old photographs and memories I once couldn't bear to look at. This time, I smiled, because this wasn't the revenge I planned, but it was the one I needed. Months later, I stood by my window, watching the sun rise over the city skyline. The world moved on, just like I had. I whispered, not to him, but to myself, you were never too much. He was just too small. And with that, the last shadow of him finally disappeared. I used to think revenge ended when the other person suffered, but it doesn't. Revenge only truly ends when you stop suffering, when their memory no longer controls the rhythm of your heartbeat. That morning, as I stood before the mirror, sunlight slipping through the half-open blinds, I realized something incredible. I wasn't thinking about Ethan anymore. I was thinking about me. For the first time in years, I looked at myself without judgment, without checking angles or searching for flaws. I had spent so long trying to become beautiful first for him, then to prove him wrong, that I forgot to ask what beauty meant to me. Now I knew. It meant peace. After everything that happened, I could have stayed bitter. God knows I had every reason to, but bitterness was still about him. Healing was about me. So I started small. A new haircut, not to impress anyone, but to feel lighter. A solo dinner at my favorite restaurant. No makeup, no pretending. A gym membership not for the mirror, but for the feeling of my lungs filling with air as I ran. Each step was a quiet rebellion against who I used to be, the girl who thought love had to hurt to be real. 2 months later, an unexpected email popped into my inbox. A women's empowerment blog had shared a viral post titled, "He called me ugly, so I built a better life instead." It wasn't mine, but it could have been. The story was so close to mine that I felt chills reading it. Thousands of comments poured in, women saying they'd been told the same thing, that they weren't enough, that they were too plain, too much, or too ambitious. I spent an hour scrolling through their stories, tears streaming down my face. Then I opened a blank page and began typing. My name is Lena. I was told I was too ugly to be loved. But I learned that beauty isn't what's reflected in mirrors, it's what refuses to stay broken. That line became the opening sentence of my first blog post. I hit publish with shaky hands, expecting maybe 5 people to read it. By the end of the week, it had 80,000 views. Women and even men began reaching out, sharing their pain, their transformations, their small victories. I wasn't just telling a story anymore. I was building a mirror for others to see themselves in. That was the moment I stopped being Ethan's ex and became Lena, the voice that made people feel seen. The same pain that once isolated me was now connecting me to thousands. One evening, after speaking at a local women's workshop, I got a message on Instagram that was short, "Proud of you." I stared at the message for a long time. No anger, no butterflies, just stillness. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Some memories don't deserve erasure, they deserve peace. 6 months passed. My blog turned into a podcast. My podcast got picked up by a streaming platform. And one day, a book publisher reached out. They wanted me to write a memoir. When I saw the proposed title, I laughed until I cried. The girl he called ugly. I told them no, because I wasn't that girl anymore. We changed it to The Rise of Lena. When the book came out, I was invited to a TV morning show in New York, sitting under those bright studio lights, wearing a simple cream blouse and jeans. I told the host my story, not to expose Ethan, but to remind people that heartbreak can be fertilizer for growth. When the interview aired, messages flooded in. Some people said I inspired them to leave toxic relationships. Others said they'd finally stopped apologizing for not being pretty enough. And that's when I realized, revenge isn't about making someone else suffer. It's about reclaiming your story from the person who tried to write it for you. A year after my book launch, I moved into a new apartment overlooking the river. Not the same one where Ethan used to live. This place was filled with plants, sunlight, and silence, my favorite kind of peace. One Sunday morning, as I was watering my plants, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery, a bouquet of wildflowers, and a note. You once said beauty was peace. I finally understand that. Congratulations on everything. You deserve it all. I smiled softly, not the smile of a woman in love, the smile of a woman who survived. I placed the flowers in a vase, sat by the window, and whispered to myself, you didn't need his apology to heal, but you got it anyway. That's great. That night, as I watched the city lights blur through the rain, I thought back to the girl I used to be, the one crying in her bathroom mirror, thinking she'd never be enough. If I could talk to her now, I'd tell her this. One day, you'll thank him for leaving, because he didn't ruin you, he redirected you. The next morning, my assistant emailed me saying my book had hit the New York Times bestseller list. I sat there, hands trembling, smiling through tears, not because of the title, the fame, or the number, but because the girl once called ugly was now inspiring thousands with her truth. I whispered, this is my revenge, and it's beautiful. I always believed endings should be quiet, that when love dies, it slips away unnoticed. But the day Ethan's world collapsed, it was anything but quiet. It started with a headline, Tech CEO's affair scandal exposed. Employee speaks out. The articles spread like wildfire. Screenshots, photos, text messages, all over social media. Ethan's name trended for days. His company's board went into emergency meetings, investors pulled out, and his spotless reputation burned before his eyes. But this wasn't just a scandal, it was a reckoning. For years, Ethan had lived like the rules didn't apply to him. He thought love was a game, and I was just another piece on his board. But he forgot something: pawns can become queens. When I stepped onto the stage that night, the charity gala he once promised we'd attend together, I felt nothing but calm. Cameras flashed, voices whispered. I walked in like I owned the place, my black gown sharp as a blade, my smile rehearsed but real enough to make him flinch when he saw me. He was there, thinner, tired, hiding behind a mask of composure. The crowd parted as he approached. Emily, he said quietly, his voice cracking, you shouldn't have come. I tilted my head. Why not? It's a public event, and you love being the center of attention. His eyes darted nervously to the photographers. Please, not here. Here is perfect, I said. You built your empire in public. You can watch it crumble in public too. He inhaled sharply. You think I don't regret it? What I did to you, to her. I smiled faintly. Regret isn't redemption, Ethan. You hurt people because you could, and now the world finally sees who you really are. He looked at me not the way he used to, not with desire or pride, but with fear, because for the first time, I had the power. Emily, he whispered, please, you've made your point. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. No, Ethan, I've just finished your story. He blinked, confused. I didn't ruin you, I said. You did. I just made sure everyone was watching when it happened. He froze, realizing the leaks, the timing, the exposure. It was all too precise to be coincidence. And in that silence, I saw it. The moment he knew. You, he said, barely audible. I met his eyes. Me. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but no words came. The photographers were already circling, snapping pictures of the man who'd built his career on charm, now standing speechless in front of the woman he'd once dismissed. As I turned away, the flashbulbs caught the shimmer of tears in his eyes. That night, his statement went viral, an apology that sounded more like surrender. The board removed him by morning. His wife filed for divorce. The mansion he flaunted was suddenly empty. And me, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post or gloat. I just stood at my apartment window, watching the sunrise. The world finally knew the truth, but I had known it all along. Power isn't about wealth or beauty. It's about control. He took mine once. Now, I'd taken his. Full circle. Love, betrayal, revenge, closure. And as the first light hit the city skyline, I whispered to myself, not with anger, but peace. You can't destroy someone who rebuilt herself from ashes. They say revenge feels like justice, a sweet echo of fairness in a world that's been cruel. But they never talk about the silence that follows. 4 months after Ethan's downfall, my life became quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. The noise of chaos was gone. but so was everything else. The thrill, the purpose, the emotion. My phone stopped buzzing with updates. My friends stopped asking questions. And the city I once loved began to feel like a hollow film set I was stuck walking through. Ethan disappeared. No interviews, no posts, no apologies, just vanished. And somehow, that bothered me more than I expected. Because revenge, I learned, doesn't end when your enemy falls. It ends when you stop needing them to. The mirror. One evening, I found myself standing in front of my bedroom mirror, the same one where, months earlier, I'd cried myself into exhaustion, mascara streaked, trembling, broken. But now, I didn't cry. I stared at my reflection, at the woman I'd become. Sleek hair, flawless skin, designer clothes, beautiful, yes, powerful, yes, but cold. I realized I hadn't felt warmth in a long time. Not real warmth, not love. I had become what he once accused me of being: calculated, distant, untouchable, and it scared me. Because somewhere between loving Ethan and destroying him, I had lost the softness that made me me. The kindness that once made people trust me, the laughter that came naturally, not as armor. I touched the mirror's surface gently, my reflection touching back, but the woman staring at me didn't feel like a survivor anymore. She felt like a ghost wearing designer perfume. The letter. Weeks later, a plain envelope arrived at my office. No name, no return address, just my initials, scrawled in shaky handwriting. I knew before I opened it who it was from. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Emily, you won. I lost everything: the company, the money, the people, but the silence hurts most. I think about what you said that night. I didn't ruin you. You did. You were right. But I hope one day you realized you didn't walk away clean either. You burned your own heart to light my downfall, and that fire doesn't go out easily. I stared at the words for a long time, my pulse trembling. Anger should have come, satisfaction, closure, but all I felt was exhaustion. He was right. I hadn't walked away clean. The party. 3 months later, I attended a corporate event, the kind Ethan and I used to dominate together. As I walked in, people smiled, whispered, complimented me. That's Emily Harper, the woman who brought down the giant. The title had followed me everywhere, a warning, a legend, a compliment wrapped in fear. I accepted the champagne flute from a waiter, smiled politely at the compliments, and yet, I felt nothing. Their admiration was hollow. They didn't see me, only the symbol of a story that had already ended. A man approached, kind eyes, steady smile. Emily Harper, he asked. I've heard a lot about you. I'd love to hear your side of it someday. He was handsome, sincere, even, but when I opened my mouth to respond, nothing came. I realized then, I didn't have a side anymore. I had given it all away, piece by piece, in headlines, and vengeance, and silence. So, I smiled faintly and said, maybe another time, and walked away. The encounter. It was raining when I saw him again. A random Tuesday evening. I was leaving a restaurant downtown when a man in a worn coat crossed the street toward me. I froze. Ethan. He looked older, thinner, like life had drained its color from him. His eyes weren't cruel anymore, just tired. He smiled faintly, hesitant. You look well. I nodded, unsure what to say. You too, I lied. We stood there in the drizzle, two ghosts of a love story that burned too bright. Finally, he spoke again. Do you ever think about us? The question hung heavy in the air. I exhaled slowly. Sometimes, I said, but not the way you think. I think about the girl I was, the one who thought love meant saving someone who didn't want to be saved. He nodded, looking down. And now, I said, I saved myself first. He smiled sadly, then stepped back as the traffic light changed. Take care of yourself, Emily, you too, I whispered. And just like that, he was gone, swallowed by the rain and the city lights. The cold. That night, I returned home, sat by the window, and finally cried. Not because I missed him, but because I missed me. Revenge had made me beautiful in a way that scared me. Sculpted, controlled, untouchable. But it had also frozen me from the inside out. And in that realization, I found something resembling peace. Maybe beauty isn't about perfection, or power, or being right. Maybe it's about being warm, even when life gives you every reason to turn cold. I stood, wiped my tears, and whispered to my reflection, not the one in the mirror this time, but the one buried deep inside me. You're still here. You made it. Don't let him take the last piece of you. For the first time in years, I believed it. Epilogue. The quiet rise. Months later, I left the city and moved to a coastal town in Maine. I started a small art gallery, not for profit, but for stories. Every painting, every sculpture, every photograph told a truth about pain, recovery, and strength. Sometimes people recognized me, sometimes they didn't, but no one ever called me the woman who ruined him again. They called me the woman who rebuilt herself. And on quiet evenings, as the sun sank over the ocean, I'd think of him, not with hate, not even regret, just distance. Because I finally understood something simple but powerful. Revenge may end a chapter, but forgiveness, even if only for yourself, writes the rest of the book. And that's when I knew the beauty had thawed. The girl who once turned cold had finally become warm again. They say revenge is sweet, but nobody talks about how bitter it tastes when it's over. Emily didn't just destroy Ethan, she destroyed every version of herself that loved him, defended him, forgave him. And when the dust finally settled, there was no applause, only silence, because revenge doesn't rebuild, it replaces. It takes away your pain, but it also steals your peace. In the end, she realized something the hard way, that power without softness is just loneliness in disguise. And that sometimes, the most dangerous transformation isn't when love turns to hate, it's when hurt turns to coldness. She learned to be warm again, to smile, not out of pride, but out of survival. To forgive, not for him, but for herself. Because revenge might close a chapter, but forgiveness, even if whispered in the dark, is what truly ends the story. And that's how Emily's secret affair ended, not with rage, not with regret, but with a woman finally free. They say silence is peaceful, but that's a lie. After everything fell apart, silence felt like punishment, a reminder that there was no one left to talk to, no noise to distract me from what I had done, and what I had become. The night Ethan's downfall became public, I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker like dying embers. I'd done it, exposed every secret, every lie, every cruel word he'd ever used against me. He was ruined, completely. And I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was empty. It was the kind of emptiness that follows a storm, when the rain stops, but the ground still trembles from what it endured. My revenge had been perfect. I didn't scream or throw things. I planned. I waited. I smiled while the fire burned behind my ribs. When I finally struck, I did it cleanly. Ethan's fake charity accounts, his hidden affair, his manipulation of investors, all of it went public through a series of anonymous leaks. Overnight, the man who once called me not good enough to stand beside him became a headline. Local entrepreneur faces scandal over fraud and infidelity. I watched his interviews, the fake smile melting into panic, for months. I dreamed of that moment, watching the same lips that once told me I wasn't beautiful enough now tremble with excuses. It should have healed something inside me. It didn't. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, my phone buzzing nonstop, messages from people who'd seen the news, friends asking if I was okay, and one message from Ethan himself. Ethan, was it you? Ethan, Emily, I know it was you. We need to talk. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen until his words blurred into the glow. He was spiraling, desperate for control, but that's what revenge does, doesn't it? It flips the power. Suddenly, he was the one begging for answers, and me, I was the ghost he couldn't reach. I remember pouring a glass of wine, sitting in that silence, and realizing how terrifying it was to get everything you ever wanted, only to find out it doesn't fix what's broken inside you. The revenge had been a masterpiece, but the satisfaction lasted seconds, because after that, there's only aftermath. I walked through my new apartment, minimalist.com, with big glass windows that made me feel safe. Everything was different from the life I'd had with him. Back then, the rooms always smelled like his cologne and beer. Now, it smelled like lavender and quiet. And yet, sometimes, quiet can feel like loneliness pretending to be peace. I sat down on the couch and closed my eyes. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw us again, the early days, when he used to trace my freckles and say I looked like art, before he started comparing me to other girls, before the humiliation, before he left me broken, calling me plain. People think cruelty leaves scars on your body, but no, it rewrites your mind. You start seeing yourself through the eyes of the person who broke you. You start believing their words. It took me years to unlearn that, to look in the mirror and not flinch, to wear red lipstick and not feel like I was pretending to be someone better. And even now, after winning, after taking everything from him, a small voice whispered, "You only did this because he made you feel worthless." That voice belonged to the old me, the one who begged him to love her, the one who thought revenge would make her whole. But there's one thing about revenge no one tells you. When you hurt someone back, you don't erase your pain, you just mirror it. It was 2 a.m. when I finally opened his message. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't respond. Instead, I typed one word, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. I couldn't decide whether to say yes, it was me or you deserved it. Instead, I sent nothing. Because silence is the most expensive answer you can give someone who used to have control over you. I turned off my phone, pulled the blanket over me, and finally let myself breathe. For the first time in years, there was no fear of being touched, mocked, or ignored. There was only me, the woman who had rebuilt herself, piece by piece, from ashes. And in that silence, a thought hit me like lightning. Maybe this was what true beauty was, not in the reflection. Not in revenge, but in the calm after you've walked through hell and survived. Still, the emptiness lingered. Revenge is like fire. It keeps you warm at first until you realize it's burning everything you built to stay alive. That night, I whispered to myself, "You did it, Emily. You ended it. But now, you have to live with it." The next morning, my name was trending anonymously, the world calling me the mystery exposer. Ethan's downfall turning into a social media storm. People cheered, joked, celebrated justice. But behind the screen, I sat quietly, sipping coffee, wondering if maybe I'd lost something to something I couldn't get back. Because revenge takes a piece of your soul as payment. And mine was due. It was late autumn when Ethan returned to the city, the same city where once he had walked, away from Ava without even a backward glance. The streets were dressed in gold leaves, but everything felt gray to him. His reflection in the cafe window looked older, colder, emptier. Success had come, but peace never followed. The man who used to mock imperfections was now haunted by his own flaws, the kind that lived deep inside. He had spent the past few years trying to fill the void with money, luxury, and women who looked perfect but felt hollow. Every time he smiled at them, he saw a ghost of Ava in their eyes. The way she had cried that night when he told her she wasn't his type. The cruel way he said she would never fit into his world. Those words had carved something dark into both of them. Now, he was back not for love, not for redemption, but because fate had quietly wrapped its fingers around him. The company he built was falling apart. Investors had turned their backs. His name, once a golden brand, had become a whispered warning in the corporate world. And the strange twist, the person behind his downfall was someone who signed every document, every strategy, with one name, a Hartman. He had heard that name months ago. At first, he ignored it, but when his board began to dissolve, when his contracts got cancelled overnight, when even his PR firm refused to represent him, it all led back to her. Ava Hartman. He remembered her last name faintly from college, though it used to sound small next to his. Now it sounded powerful, like a wall he couldn't climb. Rumor said she had built an empire in fashion, art, and technology, something new, something bold. People whispered about her brilliance, her ruthlessness, and her beauty that could silence a room. Ethan laughed bitterly. Beauty, the same word he had once weaponized. He wasn't sure what he wanted to apologize or to beg, to hate or to understand, but he needed to see her. He needed to know how much she remembered of the boy who once broke her. Maybe she wouldn't even recognize him anymore. Maybe she would slam the door in his face. But for once in his life, Ethan wanted to face what he had run from. He drove to the address he found online, a glass skyscraper with Hartman Industries, glowing in silver on its entrance. It was raining, the kind of rain that blurs everything into soft watercolors. He stepped into the lobby, drenched, feeling small. The receptionist lifted her eyes, scanning him with polite confusion. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," Ethan replied, his voice rough. "But I need to see Miss Hartman." "Tell her it's Ethan Vale." The name hung in the air like a curse. The receptionist blinked, typed something on her computer, and paused. For a moment, Ethan thought she would refuse him. Instead, she gave a faint smile. She said, "She's been expecting you." Ethan's heart dropped. Expecting me. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. Every floor that passed seemed to strip away another layer of his pride. By the time the doors opened, he was no longer the confident businessman who used to walk through boardrooms with a smirk. He was just a man tired, scared, and guilty. Her office was enormous, minimalist, and cold. A single sculpture of marble stood near the window, a woman, emerging from stone, half finished. The symbolism hit him like a punch. Then she appeared. Ava stepped out from behind her desk, her presence quiet but commanding. Her hair was the same dark silk he remembered, but now it framed a face that had learned power. Her eyes, once shy and uncertain, were sharp, glacial, and unreadable. "Ethan Vale," she said softly, almost tasting the words. "I wondered when you'd finally crawl back." He froze. There was no hatred in her tone. That was the worst part. Indifference was far colder than anger. "I didn't crawl," he managed to say, his voice trembling slightly. "I came to talk." "Talk?" She smiled faintly. "You had your chance to talk years ago, but you preferred to judge." Her words slid like a blade beneath his skin. "I was stupid," he whispered. "Young, arrogant. She held up a hand. "Save your apology. I don't need it. Everything that needed to be said was said the day you called me ugly. The rest was my response." She walked toward the window, the skyline glowing behind her. "You see that city out there, Ethan? You once told me I'd never belong in it, that I'd always be a small-town girl with big dreams and no face for the spotlight." She turned slightly. "Now the city belongs to me." Ethan looked down, ashamed. "I know," he said quietly, "and you deserve it." Ava tilted her head, examining him. "Deserve? That's a word you never used for me before." Funny how regret changes vocabulary. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that he had been pressured, that his world back then was shallow, full of people who judged appearances, but none of it mattered now. The truth was simple. He had broken her, and she had rebuilt herself into something stronger. "I came," he said slowly, "to tell you I was wrong. About everything. You were never the ugly one, Ava. I was." For a brief second, he saw something flicker in her eyes, something human. Then it vanished. "I know," she said simply. The silence stretched. Ethan finally understood what true defeat felt like. Not the loss of money or power, but standing in front of someone you once crushed, realizing they have outgrown the need to hurt you back. He turned to leave, feeling the weight of his mistakes pressing into his chest. But before he reached the door, Ava spoke again, her voice low, deliberate, cold. "Ethan." He stopped. "Yes, don't think this is over. You're not here for closure. You're here for consequence." He turned slowly, confusion tightening his throat. "What do you mean?" Her smile was soft, beautiful, merciless. "You'll see soon enough." Ethan left her office with shaking hands. The elevator's descent felt like falling through time, each floor pulling him deeper into a past he had tried to bury. Her words, "You're not here for closure. You're here for consequence," echoed through his mind like a sentence. By the time he stepped into the street, the rain had turned into a storm. People rushed by under umbrellas. Cars hissed across the soaked pavement, but Ethan felt strangely detached from it all, like the world was a painting, and he was fading out of it. He didn't notice the black car parked across the street, or the figure watching him from behind tinted glass. Ava's eyes followed him silently. The moment the elevator door had closed, she had pressed a small remote button, activating something she had planned for years. It wasn't about revenge in the crude sense of pain. Ava's revenge was art, psychological, calculated, elegant. She whispered to herself, "Let's see if mirrors still scare him." The next morning, Ethan woke up in his apartment to find a parcel at his doorstep. It was wrapped in black silk, tied with a golden ribbon. There was no note, no name, only a single embossed symbol on the wrapping, a small, mirrored heart. He hesitated for a long moment before unwrapping it. Inside was a mirror, a beautifully crafted, vintage-looking piece framed in dark wood. It looked expensive, ancient, almost familiar. He picked it up and read the inscription at the bottom, in delicate cursive. "The truth is never beautiful. The beautiful are never true." The words sent a chill down his spine. He had said those exact words once, years ago, to Ava. In a cruel attempt to justify breaking up with her, he set the mirror on his wall. It didn't seem strange at first, but as the hours passed, the reflection began to play tricks on him. At night, when the lights dimmed, the glass would shimmer faintly. Sometimes he thought he saw movement, shadows where there should be none. Sometimes his reflection smiled a fraction later than he did by the third night. Sleep refused to come. He sat before the mirror, staring into it, searching for the flaw. It's just stress, he muttered. Just nerves. But somewhere deep down, he knew this was no coincidence. Ava had done something. She wanted him to look, not at her, but at himself. And when he did, he hated what he saw. Ava watched from afar. Every day, one of her assistants would send her a report, how Ethan hadn't shown up to meetings, how his voicemail was full, how he had cancelled appointments. She had arranged everything quietly, making sure his company fell apart piece by piece, but without ever directly touching him. Her revenge wasn't about destroying his career. It was about making him see the ugliness within himself, the same ugliness he once claimed to see in her. Late one evening, she stood before her own mirror, an identical twin of the one she'd sent Ethan, but hers reflected peace, calm, power. It reminded her of the girl she used to be, naive, hopeful, desperate for validation. That girl was gone. Still, a faint ache stirred in her chest as she whispered, "You wanted beauty, Ethan. Now, live with it." Meanwhile, Ethan began to unravel. He started missing calls, ignoring people, locking himself indoors. He couldn't look away from the mirror, even though every reflection made him feel more like a stranger. His skin looked paler, his eyes darker. Sometimes he thought the reflection whispered things, echoes of his own voice saying cruel words from the past. Who could ever love a face like that? "You'll never belong in my world. You're lucky I even gave you a chance." He slammed his fist into the glass one night, shattering it. But the next morning, when he walked into the living room, the mirror was whole again, spotless, waiting. He backed away, terrified. "No, this isn't real," he muttered. "This can't be real." He tried throwing it out, but the moment he turned away, it reappeared on the wall. He called a friend, his last remaining business partner, Daniel. But when Daniel arrived, the mirror was gone. "Ethan, there's nothing here," Daniel said, frowning. "You need sleep. You look awful." Ethan grabbed him by the arm. "You don't understand. She's doing this, Ava. She's behind it." Daniel looked at him with pity. "Ava Hartman, the one who owns half this city now. Ethan, you're losing it. Just move on." But Ethan couldn't. He saw her face in every reflection, her voice in every whisper. He started dreaming of her, not the Ava he remembered, but the new Ava, powerful, cold, breathtakingly beautiful. She would stand behind him in the mirror and ask softly, "Do you see it now?" Every time he turned around, she was gone. On the seventh night, he broke. He drove to her mansion, a sleek, white structure on the edge of the city, surrounded by tall pines and silence. He didn't even remember how he got there, only that his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He stumbled out into the rain and banged on her door. It opened slowly. Ava stood there, wearing a silver robe, calm as moonlight. She looked at him as though she had been waiting. "Please," Ethan gasped, soaked, broken. "Make it stop." Ava tilted her head slightly. "What should I make stop?" "The mirror," he whispered. "It's haunting me. You did this." She smiled faintly. "I only gave you a gift, Ethan, a reflection. You're the one who filled it with monsters." He stepped closer, desperate. "Ava, I can't live like this anymore." Her eyes softened just slightly. "Then maybe it's time you looked deeper." She turned and pointed to a large mirror in her hallway. "Go on, look." He hesitated, then stepped forward. The mirror was vast, ornate, gleaming, but this reflection wasn't twisted or broken. It was true. He saw himself tired, weathered, stripped of all his armor. For the first time, he didn't look powerful. He looked human. A tear rolled down his cheek. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything." Ava nodded slowly. "I know, but forgiveness isn't part of the story, Ethan. Only truth." Outside, thunder cracked across the sky. Ethan looked at her one last time, knowing this was the end of something he couldn't even name. Ava turned away and said quietly, "The mirror won't haunt you anymore, but neither will peace." The night after Ethan's visit, Ava stood alone in her marble hallway, watching the rain trickle down the enormous windows. The echo of Ethan's trembling voice still lingered in her mind. Make it stop. She had waited years for that moment, imagining it hundreds of different ways, but not like this. He wasn't the arrogant man who'd shattered her confidence anymore. He was hollow, frightened, and trembling before her like a reflection that had lost its light. She had expected victory to taste sweet. Instead, it tasted like ashes. Ava turned toward the mirror, the one Ethan had just looked into. It was quiet now, cold and flawless. Her own reflection looked perfect, composed, successful, stunning, but when she tilted her head, for just an instant, she thought she saw the faintest outline of the girl she used to be, barefaced, teary-eyed, waiting for someone to tell her she was enough. She looked away quickly. Ethan, meanwhile, drove home through the storm. His mind was a blur. He replayed Ava's final words again and again. The mirror won't haunt you anymore, but neither will peace. At first, he didn't understand what she meant, but soon, silence itself began to feel like punishment. He turned on the radio to fill the quiet static. He switched on the TV. Every reflection of the screen flickered with Ava's face. He smashed it to the floor. He covered every mirror, every glossy surface in his apartment. Yet at night he could still feel her behind him, watching, waiting. Her calm voice would whisper in his dreams, "You called me ugly once. Now, tell me, what do you see?" He'd wake drenched in sweat, screaming her name, clawing at his walls. Days turned to weeks. He stopped eating. He stopped answering calls. His colleagues sent wellness checks, but when they knocked on his door, he never responded. Inside, Ethan sat on the floor of his darkened apartment, staring at a single mirror he hadn't managed to remove. The mirror was cracked now, spiderweb lines across its surface, yet every night, when the moonlight hit it, it seemed to glow faintly, as if someone was standing on the other side. Sometimes he swore he heard breathing across the city. Ava sat in her study, pretending to work, but unable to concentrate. The mirror on her wall seemed heavier lately, almost alive. She tried to ignore it, focusing on emails and contracts. But her mind kept returning to Ethan's broken face in the rain. Her assistant, Claire, noticed the change. "You okay, Miss Hartman? You look pale lately." "I'm fine," Ava replied too quickly, but she wasn't. At night, when she removed her makeup and stood before the glass, her reflection didn't comfort her anymore. The woman looking back was powerful, beautiful, but there was something cold behind her eyes, something unrecognizable. She thought about the girl. She used to be awkward, insecure, desperate for love. That girl had died long ago. Ava had killed her to survive. But now she wondered if she had also killed her soul. The first time the mirror spoke to her, Ava almost convinced herself she imagined it. She was brushing her hair late one night when the voice echoed soft, distant, and painfully familiar. "You're no better than him." Ava froze. The hairbrush fell from her hand. She stared into the mirror, heart racing, but the reflection was normal, silent, still. She shook her head. "I'm just tired," she whispered. "Just tired." But the next night, the voice came again, louder. "You wanted to be seen. Now you're the monster." Ava backed away, breath trembling. "No," she said aloud. "I gave him what he deserved." The reflection didn't move, but the eyes smiled. Over the following days, Ava started losing her composure. She'd snap at employees for minor mistakes, then lock herself in her office for hours, trembling. Her therapist tried to reach her, but Ava stopped answering calls. The more she tried to escape the mirror, the more it followed her in the polished elevator doors, the glass walls of her office, even her phone screen. Every reflection seemed to whisper the same question. "Who are you now, Ava?" Her nights became torture. She'd wake up to see faint fingerprints on the inside of the mirror, as if someone had been pressing against it from the other side. Ethan, on the other hand, was spiraling faster. He had lost everything: his company shares, his savings, his reputation. No one wanted to work with him anymore. Rumors spread that he'd lost his mind, that he talked to ghosts, and maybe they were right. One night, desperate to end it, he packed a small bag, locked his door, and drove toward the cliffs outside the city, the same place he once took Ava years ago, back when she still trusted him. He parked near the edge, stepped out, and stared at the storming sea below. "This is what you wanted, right?" he shouted into the wind. "For me to disappear?" The storm didn't answer. But when lightning flashed, he thought he saw a figure standing far behind him, a woman, motionless, watching. He blinked. She was gone. He dropped to his knees, crying, "Ava, please, I'm sorry." The wind swallowed his words. Back in her mansion, Ava woke with a start that same night, her heart pounding, tears on her cheeks. She had dreamed of Ethan, standing on the cliffs, calling her name through thunder. She rushed to the mirror, trembling, and for the first time, she saw him inside it. Not a reflection, not an illusion. Ethan, drenched and broken, looking right at her through the glass. "Help me," he whispered. "Please." Ava staggered back, shaking her head. "No, this isn't real. This isn't real." But when she looked again, the mirror was empty. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor. For the first time in years, She felt something she thought she had buried, fear. That night marked the start of something darker. The moment revenge turned inward, the mirror, once her weapon, had become her judge. She couldn't tell anymore if she was the avenger or the haunted. But she knew one thing: the silence that followed was worse than any scream it began. Subtly a flicker in the glass. Ava was applying her lipstick one morning when her reflection blinked half a second too late. She froze, the tube trembling in her hand. Her breath hitched. No, she whispered to herself, not again. The reflection just stood there, smiling faintly, a soft, sad smile that didn't belong to her. Then, as if the mirror had turned into water, the image shifted. The Ava inside the glass was different. Her hair shorter, her face bare of makeup, her eyes warm instead of cold. Behind her, the mansion was gone, replaced by a small, sunlit kitchen. A child laughed in the background. A man's voice called her name, gentle, familiar. Ava reached toward the mirror, her fingers trembling. The moment her fingertip touched the glass, the image vanished. Her reflection returned, flawless, painted, lonely, and she broke. She slid down against the wall, shaking. That woman in the mirror, that was the life she could have had if she hadn't let vengeance consume her. A simpler life, a happier one. She whispered to herself, "What have I done?" Meanwhile, across town, Ethan's days were blurring together. He lived in a fog of whiskey and regret, barely aware of time passing. The mirror in his apartment had grown darker, not cracked anymore, but black, as if it had swallowed the light. He tried to destroy it once. He smashed it with a chair, but the glass didn't shatter, it bled. Thick, dark liquid dripped down the surface, smelling faintly of iron. He backed away, horrified. That's when he heard her voice again. "You called me ugly, Ethan, but you were the one who was empty." He screamed, grabbed his keys, and fled. But wherever he went, in the car window, in store doors, even puddles on the street, he saw her reflection watching him, not angry, not vengeful, disappointed. Ethan stopped sleeping altogether. He wrote letters to Ava that he never sent. One of them read, "You won, Ava. You got your revenge. But please, please, make it stop. I can't live like this anymore." He never mailed it. He didn't believe she'd care. Ava tried everything to escape the mirrors. She covered them all. Silk sheets, duct tape, even had one removed. But it didn't matter. Her phone screen reflected. Her silverware shone. Her own eyes betrayed her. One night, she stood in her dressing room and whispered into the darkness, "What do you want from me?" Her reflection, faint, distorted, whispered back, "The truth." The next morning, Ava drove to the only place she hadn't been in years, her old apartment. It was small, quiet, and long forgotten. The walls were still painted the same pale blue, her handwriting faintly visible on the corner, where she once wrote dreams on sticky notes. She ran her hand across the old vanity, dust rising in the morning light. The mirror there was cracked, but harmless, human. It reflected her exactly as she was, tired, older, fragile. She looked herself in the eye. "You were enough," she whispered to the girl she once was. "He made you forget that." Tears streamed down her face, for the first time in years. They weren't tears of rage, they were release. She stayed there for hours, sitting cross-legged on the floor, remembering the woman she used to be, the one who wanted love, not revenge, the one who laughed easily, who believed in second chances. But as the sun dipped low, her phone buzzed. It was a text from a number she hadn't seen in years. "Ethan, I need to see you. Just once, before it's too late." Her heart stuttered. For a long time, she didn't move. Then she typed back, "Where?" They met that night at the cliffs, the same cliffs from their past. The air was heavy with fog, the ocean roaring below. Ethan looked like a ghost, unshaven, eyes hollow, trembling. He could barely stand straight. Ava approached slowly, her heels crunching on the gravel. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan said, "I thought I wanted to destroy you back then, but I was destroying myself." He laughed weakly. "You were right, Ava. You were always right." She stared at him. "Right about what?" "That I'd see your face forever," he whispered, "even when you weren't there." He stepped closer, his eyes glistening in the moonlight. "I'm sorry for everything." Ava's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. The hatred she had carried for years suddenly felt small, irrelevant, compared to the broken man standing before her. "Ethan," she began softly, but he raised his hand. "I'm not asking forgiveness," he said, "just peace." Then he turned toward the edge. "Ethan, don't." Before she could finish, he stepped forward. For a split second, She saw his face calm, almost relieved, before the darkness swallowed him. The sea roared. The fog closed in. Ava fell to her knees, screaming his name, but the ocean didn't answer. Hours later, she sat in her car, drenched in rain, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman who looked back wasn't cold anymore. She was shattered and finally human. The mirror didn't flicker, didn't whisper, just silence, jawed pure, aching silence. That night, Ava returned home, walked straight to the master mirror, the one that had haunted her for months, and stood before it. "Are you happy now?" she whispered. But the mirror stayed quiet. She reached out and pressed her palm to the glass. "I forgive you," she said to Ethan, to her reflection, to herself. And for the first time in years, the mirror reflected only Ava, not the ghost of her pain, not the echo of her revenge, just her. A tear fell down her cheek, and when it hit the glass, the mirror rippled, then cleared. From that night on, she never heard the whispers again, but she never stopped visiting the cliffs. Not out of guilt, out of remembrance, because sometimes, when the moonlight touched the water just right, she thought she saw a reflection in the waves. Ethan, smiling faintly, finally free. The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. It wasn't a storm, just that soft, endless drizzle that seemed to dissolve everything. Light, color, even time. Ethan drove in silence, windshield wipers rhythmically sweeping away the world in front of him, only for it to blur again seconds later. The address Clara's sister had texted him was tucked far from the city, an old coastal town where the sea met the cliffs and the wind carried the smell of salt and loss. She was there, recovering, or maybe just hiding. Every mile felt heavier than the last. He thought about turning back, more than once, about leaving her alone, about respecting the silence she'd chosen after the chaos of her public breakdown, but every time he tried to convince himself to stop, he saw her face, not the woman from the stage, not the headlines, but Clara, from before, barefoot in their kitchen, wearing his shirt, laughing because she'd burned the pancakes again. That memory kept him going. When he finally reached the house, a white wooden cottage with chipped paint and wild vines, he just sat there, engine running. The curtains were closed, but a soft light glowed behind them. It was the kind of light that looked lonely. He stepped out into the drizzle. Each step toward the door felt like walking through years of mistakes. He didn't knock right away. He just stood there, listening to the ocean and the faint hum of a record player from inside. Then, finally, he raised his hand and tapped twice. The door opened slowly. Clara stood there, pale, tired, but beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Her hair was shorter now, uneven at the ends. "No makeup, no armor, Ethan," she whispered, almost like she didn't believe it was him. "Hi," he said softly. For a moment, they just stared, not like lovers or enemies, but like two people who had once been everything and were now trying to figure out what that meant. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. The inside smelled like coffee and salt water. A half-written letter sat on the table, next to a mug and a pack of tissues. He wanted to ask if it was for him, but he didn't. Not yet. She poured him coffee without asking. Old habits. Neither spoke for a while. The record player crackled quietly in the background, an old song they used to dance to when things were simpler. "You look," Ethan started, then stopped. "Different," she said with a faint smile. "Yeah. I guess I left perfect somewhere back there." He nodded. "You left it right where it never belonged." That made her laugh, a small, broken sound. But it was real. Then, silence again. Not awkward, just heavy, full of unsaid things. Finally, she turned toward him. "Why are you here, Ethan?" "I needed to see you," he said. "Not the version the cameras made, not the story everyone's telling, just you." She looked down at her hands. "You saw what happened. The world's seen me at my worst. I saw someone fighting back," he said. "I saw you being honest, maybe for the first time." Clara's eyes glistened. "Honesty doesn't heal everything." "No," he agreed, "but it's where everything broken starts to make sense." She stood and walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "You know what's funny? I thought that speech would destroy me, but instead, it set me free." He watched her, realizing how much she'd changed, how much they had. "Do you hate me, Clara?" he asked finally. She turned around, slowly. "I did," she said quietly. "For a long time, for letting me become something I wasn't. For loving me like a painting you could perfect, instead of a person you could understand." He swallowed hard. "And now," she said after a long pause, "I just feel sorry, for both of us." Ethan stood too. I deserved worse. Maybe, she said softly, but I don't want to punish you anymore. I don't have that kind of anger left. He nodded, feeling something loosen in his chest, relief, grief, maybe both. I came to say goodbye, he said. Her eyes filled again. Goodbye. Yeah, I think we've both been holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore. He took a step closer. You're building something new now, without me, and I think that's how it should be. Clara looked down, her voice trembling. I kept dreaming that one day we'd fix it. He smiled sadly. Maybe we did, just not in the way we imagined. A long silence followed. Only the rain filled it. Then, slowly, she reached for him. Her fingers brushed his, just like the first time they'd met. That same spark, warm, fleeting, impossible, flickered between them. He leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a promise. It was closure. When he pulled back, she was crying quietly, beautifully. I'll always love who we were, she whispered. And I'll always love who you've become, he said. Then he stepped back, turned toward the door, and paused one last time. Outside, the sea roared against the cliffs, wild, endless, untamed. He looked back at her, standing by the window, framed by the light and rain. She gave him a faint nod, the kind that says everything words never could. And then, Ethan walked away. The rain swallowed him whole. Behind him, Clara closed her eyes and whispered into the silence, "Goodbye, my beautiful mistake." After the last goodbye, something inside Clara shifted permanently. She didn't cry anymore. The tears that had once come so easily for love, for loss, for every small heartbreak had dried up like a riverbed, scorched by the sun. What replaced them wasn't peace. It was stillness. Cold, calculating, powerful stillness. She started to live like a woman sculpted out of marble. Every movement was graceful, but empty of warmth. Every smile was measured, designed. Her laughter, once natural, innocent, now came out sharp, practiced, like the sound of glass breaking under pressure. People noticed. Her friends whispered that she'd changed. Her coworkers said she'd grown stronger. But the truth was darker. Clara had become untouchable. Ethan's betrayal had been the final lesson she didn't know she needed, the kind that teaches you not to love too deeply, not to forgive too easily. When she walked into her room now, people stopped talking, not out of admiration, but out of unease. She carried an energy that made even confident men lower their eyes. Her beauty, once soft and inviting, had turned cold. Not the kind of cold that pushes people away, the kind that freezes them in place. She'd stopped chasing closure. She stopped explaining herself. She stopped needing anyone's understanding. Clara built her empire in silence. She reopened her design studio, the one she and Ethan once dreamed of building together. Except now, his name was gone from the blueprints. The new sign read, "C. Monroe Interiors, Elegance Without Emotion." The tagline wasn't a coincidence. Her clients loved her. Her portfolio exploded. Fashion magazines wrote about her resilient transformation and mysterious aura. They didn't know the story behind it. They didn't know that every perfect interior she created was an echo of the perfection she used to chase in herself. She wasn't trying to impress anymore. She was rebuilding, controlled. That every polished marble floor, every symmetrical room, every clean, sterile white wall reflected her new philosophy, beauty without vulnerability. Yet late at night, when the world quieted, she sometimes caught her reflection in the mirror, the perfect face, the perfect life, and wondered if she'd gone too far. Had she traded pain for emptiness, or was emptiness the price of peace? The question haunted her. One evening, while reviewing blueprints at her studio, her assistant mentioned that Ethan had been seen again, this time, not drunk, not desperate, but different. Volunteering, her assistant said carefully, at the rehab center near the river. Clara froze, pen hovering midair. For a moment, she felt her heart twitch, a muscle memory of what used to be love, but the feeling passed just as quickly as it came. She nodded, good for him. And that was it. No anger, no longing, no regret. Just nothing. But as she drove home that night, she couldn't stop replaying the words. Volunteering, changed, different. The old Clara, the girl who believed in redemption, would have smiled. The new Clara tightened her grip on the steering wheel and whispered, "Too late." Still, a thought lodged itself in her mind like a thorn. If he could change, why couldn't she feel again? She sat awake for hours that night, staring out her window at the city lights, each one flickering like the ghosts of her past. selves. At 3 a.m., she picked up her sketchbook and began to draw something she hadn't done in months. Not furniture, not fashion, buff faces, one face, Ethan's. Then she drew another, her own, but not the new one the world saw. The old one, tired, flawed, human. Tears didn't come, but something broke inside, something soft, small, and buried deep. For the first time in a long time, Clara didn't feel cold. She felt empty in a human way, and somehow, that was progress. It had been almost a year since Clara last heard Ethan's name spoken out loud. Life had settled into something smooth and precise: work, meetings, design reviews, charity galas. Everything in her world was immaculate, perfect, predictable. Until the day she saw him. It was a Thursday afternoon in downtown Chicago. The wind was sharp, biting, the sky gray as concrete. Clara was walking out of an upscale cafe, clutching her espresso and mentally planning a client presentation, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Clara. The sound stopped her heart. She turned slowly, and there he was, Ethan. Except he wasn't the same man. Gone was the arrogance, the smug grin, the expensive jacket that used to hang like a statement of superiority. This Ethan looked older, quieter. His eyes, the same deep brown she once loved, carried something unfamiliar: regret. He smiled faintly. Didn't think you'd recognize me. Clara didn't speak at first. She just stared. Her throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. I almost didn't. He laughed softly. Yeah, look different. You do, she said, each word clipped, deliberate. There was a silence heavy enough to drown in. Around them, the city moved. People walked. Cars honked. The world spun. But for a few seconds, it was like they were standing in a snow globe, untouched and frozen in time. Ethan shifted awkwardly. I heard about your business. You're doing amazing things. Clara. She nodded once. I am. He looked down, shame flickering across his face. I wanted to reach out before, but I didn't think you'd want to hear from me. You were right, she replied coolly. He flinched. I deserve that. She could have walked away then. She should have, but something inside her, maybe curiosity, maybe unfinished anger, kept her rooted. What do you want, Ethan? She asked finally. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Closure, maybe forgiveness. Clara tilted her head. Closure is a selfish word. It's something people chase when they can't handle guilt. He looked at her, eyes wet. Then maybe I'm guilty as hell. That made her almost smile. Almost. They stood there for another moment before Ethan spoke again, voice trembling slightly. I never stopped thinking about you. I know I can't undo what I did, but I wanted to tell you I'm clean now. I've been sober for 8 months. I work at the rehab center, help people who were like me. I thought you should know. Clara exhaled slowly, the cold air clouding between them. Good, she said quietly. I'm glad you found something that makes you feel better about yourself. He winced at the sharpness in her tone, but didn't argue. Instead, he looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, his expression changed. You're beautiful, he murmured, but different. I know, she said. I built this version of me. I can tell. His voice softened. You look untouchable. That's the point. He hesitated. Does it make you happy? That question hit harder than she expected. For the first time in a long while, Clara couldn't find her answer. She turned to leave. Happiness isn't the goal anymore. He called after her. Then what is? She paused just long enough to whisper, peace. And she walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation marks to a story she thought was over. That night, she couldn't sleep. Ethan's words echoed in her mind like a song she couldn't turn off. Does it make you happy? She stared at her reflection in the mirror. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect posture, but happiness. She wasn't sure she'd recognize it if it stood in front of her. At 2 a.m., she got dressed and drove. No destination, no plan, just the hum of the engine and the faint buzz of city lights. Without realizing it, she ended up near the river, in front of the same rehab center her assistant had mentioned months ago. The lights were still on. Inside, she saw him, Ethan, sitting with a group of recovering addicts, listening, nodding, his face soft, human. He didn't see her, but she watched for a while, arms folded tight against her chest. For a brief moment, the ice cracked, just slightly, because despite everything, there was a tiny flicker of something she thought had died. Empathy. Not love, not forgiveness, just understanding. She whispered into the night, good for you, Ethan. Then she turned and walked back to her car. As she drove home, snow began to fall, soft, silent, clean. She smiled faintly. the first genuine smile in months. Because even if her heart had turned cold, maybe, just maybe, there was still a little warmth left somewhere beneath the frost. I woke up that morning with a knot in my stomach, the kind that tells you something is about to change. The headlines were already flashing my name: Clara Monroe accused of corporate manipulation. Beneath it was a blurry photo of me stepping out of my office. Expression unreadable. They didn't know the truth. Not yet, but they were hungry for blood, and beauty, once admired, turns into an easy target when it becomes too powerful. By the time I reached my office, my assistant looked pale. "The board's waiting," she whispered. Of course they were. I walked into the glass conference room, the skyline of Chicago stretching behind them like a cold mural. 10 men in expensive suits, all of whom once applauded me, now stared as if I were the villain in their story. "Clara," said Jonathan, the chairman, folding his hands, "there are serious concerns about your last acquisition." I smiled thinly. "Concerns or jealousy?" He blinked. "Excuse me, I built this company from nothing," I said, voice calm but I took every risk none of you had the courage to, and now that I've made it unbreakable, suddenly there are concerns. The room went silent. I could see it in their eyes, the shift from admiration to fear. I had become the kind of woman they couldn't control, and they hated that. Jonathan cleared his throat. "This isn't personal." "Everything's personal," I interrupted, "especially when it's about power." The meeting dragged on for an hour. They probed, accused, tried to corner me with paperwork and legal language. But I had come too far, learned too much. I had studied men like them all my life, starting with Ethan. They underestimated the quiet ones, the broken ones. By the end, I gave them my calmest smile. "Gentlemen," I said, gathering my files, "if you think I built this empire without expecting you to eventually turn on me, you don't know me at all." I walked out before they could respond. By afternoon, the media frenzy exploded. My name was trending. Half the country loved me, the other half wanted to see me fall. But the only call that mattered came from an unknown number. "Clara," the voice said softly, "it's Ethan." For a second I couldn't breathe. "I saw the news," he continued. "Are you okay?" I almost laughed. "Do I sound okay?" "You sound like someone who's been fighting too long." I leaned against the window, watching the snow blur the city lights. "You don't get to analyze me, Ethan. Not anymore." "I'm not," he said. "I'm just worried." That word struck me, worried. It sounded foreign coming from him. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity." His voice was quiet, gentle. "You taught me something once, Clara. You said pain can either destroy you or build you. I see now, you let it build walls. Maybe it's time to let them fall." My throat tightened. "Don't call me again," I said, and hung up. But his words stayed, like ashes clinging to the edge of fire. That night, I attended the charity gala, because even in chaos, appearances had to be flawless. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, violins, and whispers. Everyone wanted a piece of me, to comfort, to gossip, to devour. I smiled through it all, the perfect mask, until I saw a reflection in the mirrored wall. Me, but not the woman I used to know. Cold eyes, tight jaw, perfect posture, a sculpture, not a person. For the first time, I wondered what had truly died, my innocence, or my ability to feel warmth. Later that night, after the gala, I drove to the lake. The city's glow rippled on the dark water. I stood there, coat wrapped tight, hair whipping in the wind, watching my reflection shatter every time the waves moved. And I thought about the girl Ethan left, the girl who cried in her tiny apartment, who begged for love, who believed beauty was the answer. That girl was gone. But sometimes I missed her. My phone buzzed again, a new headline: "Clara Monroe steps down amid investigation." I hadn't made that decision yet, but maybe it was time. But maybe letting go wasn't defeat. Maybe it was freedom. The next morning, I sent an email to the board, effective immediately. "I resign as CEO of Monroe & Co. The empire is yours to tame or ruin. I'm done pretending control feels like peace." Then I packed a single suitcase, closed my laptop, and left the office without looking back. For once, no cameras followed me, no flash, no noise, just silence. I drove until the skyline disappeared behind me. Hours later, I found myself in a small coastal town in Maine, wooden docks, seagulls, salt in the air. For the first time in years, I felt small, and it was beautiful. That night, sitting by the fire in a rented cabin, I wrote a letter to Ethan. You once asked me what my goal was. I said peace. I lied. I didn't know what peace was back then. I confused silence with strength. But now I understand. Peace isn't cold. It's warm. It's the kind of warmth that doesn't need anyone's permission. You hurt me once, but you also woke me up. Without your betrayal, I'd never have become this woman. So, thank you not for breaking me, but for showing me that I could rebuild. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I do. I didn't sign it. I just watched the ink dry, folded it neatly, and tossed it into the fire. The paper curled, darkened, vanished as the flames flickered. I whispered, when beauty turned cold, it finally found warmth again. And for the first time in her entire story, Clara Monroe smiled, not as a weapon, but as a woman who had survived. The sun rose slow that morning, a soft, golden whisper against the frost on my window. I hadn't seen light like that in years. For the first time since I could remember, I didn't wake to an alarm, a phone call, or the sound of another person's expectations, only the quiet hum of the ocean beyond the cabin walls. I wrapped myself in a blanket and stepped outside. The sand was cold beneath my feet, and the world smelled of salt and pine. The horizon burned orange, endless and clean. No skyscrapers, no boardrooms, no ghosts of who I used to be. For once, I didn't feel like Clara Monroe, the woman who rebuilt herself from pain. I just felt like Clara. It had been 6 weeks since I left Chicago, 6 weeks since I resigned, disappeared, and let the world wonder what became of me. The tabloids had tried to fill the silence. Clara Monroe in rehab, Clara Monroe pregnant, Clara Monroe on the run. They always needed a version of me, something to feed on, but they couldn't find me here. I had bought the cabin under a different name, paid in cash, and left no forwarding address. The woman who once lived for the spotlight now found peace in invisibility. Every morning, I walked along the beach. Every night, I wrote in my journal. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even particularly happy, but it was real. And after years of pretending, real felt sacred. One afternoon, I drove into the nearby town, a postcard kind of place, all white fences and coffee shops that still used handwritten menus. I sat at a small diner near the harbor, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt hope, when an elderly woman slid into the seat across from me. "You're not from around here," she said. "No," I smiled faintly. "Is it that obvious?" "You've got city eyes," she replied. "They see everything and trust nothing." I laughed. "You're not wrong." She stirred her tea slowly, studying me. "People who come here are usually running from something." "Maybe I was," I said, "but I think I've stopped running now." She nodded thoughtfully. "Then it's time to forgive." "Forgive who?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Bim," she said simply. "And her, the woman you used to be." I didn't respond. I just looked out the window at the harbor, where the tide was rising. Forgive. Such a simple word, and yet it felt heavier than all the diamonds I'd ever worn. That night, back at the cabin, I lit the fireplace and poured myself a glass of wine. I pulled out the box I'd buried in my suitcase. Photos, letters, pieces of a past I hadn't dared to look at. The first photo was of Ethan and me. We were young, stupid, and full of belief. I traced the outline of my face, the innocence there, the unfiltered joy. I remembered that night clearly. He'd told me I was beautiful, not because of the dress or the makeup, but because of the way I looked at him, and I had believed him. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes from an old scar, not a fresh wound. "I hope you're happy, Ethan," I whispered, "wherever you are." Then I took the photo and slipped it into the fire. One by one, I burned them all, every photo, every receipt, every memory that had once chained me. When the last ember went dark, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not pain, not regret, just release. A week later, a letter arrived, no return address, just my name, handwritten. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting it to be from the past. It was, Ethan, Clara. "I don't know if this will ever reach you. I don't even know if you'll care, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not the kind of sorry that fixes things, but the kind that finally tells the truth. You didn't deserve the way I left you. You didn't deserve the names I called you when I was really angry at myself. You were never ugly. You were too bright, and I wasn't ready to stand next to someone who shined like that. I've followed your story. I saw the empire you built, and I know it came from the ashes I helped create. But still, I want you to know that I never stopped believing you were the most remarkable person I ever met. If you ever want peace, real peace, it's yours." You've already earned it. I sat there staring at the letter for a long time. No tears, just stillness. He hadn't asked for forgiveness this time. He'd given it to himself, and somehow, that was enough. A few days later, I stood on the cliff overlooking the sea. The wind was wild, the waves angry, but the sky above was clear. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed. The girl who begged to be loved, the woman who built an empire out of spite, the beauty that turned cold to survive, soul that finally learned warmth again. And I realized they were all me. I didn't need to erase her anymore. I didn't need revenge, validation, or the world's attention. I just needed quiet. And in that quiet, I whispered to the ocean, "You were right, Ethan. I've already earned it." The wind carried my words away, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Weeks passed, the town began to feel like home. I started helping at the local shelter, teaching art to kids who'd lost their parents to addiction or violence. They didn't know who I was, not the headlines, not the scandal, just a woman who showed up every week with paint and patience. One of the girls, maybe 12, once looked at me and said, "Miss Clara, you smile like you're sad." I laughed softly. "Maybe I am. Then why do you smile?" she asked. "Because I made it out," I said, "and one day, you will too." On my last night before the spring arrived, I stood by the mirror, not the kind that shows makeup or clothes, but the tall, wooden one I'd found at a thrift shop. My reflection stared back, older, calmer, softer. For a moment, I saw her, the woman who once mistook beauty for worth, and I whispered, "We made it." The mirror didn't lie this time. It showed me not as perfection, but as peace. I blew out the candle, turned off the light, and let the night take me. Because sometimes, the final revenge is simply becoming someone your pain can no longer recognize.